Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the official Curious Realm coverage of MUFON Symposium 2023, coming to you from Covington, Kentucky. Our first guest today is an artist and vendor here at the show, Lee Grabarczyk of Soulful Symbols. I was struck by your artwork when I walked in, Lee. Watching you unload it. I myself do a lot of work in the realm of therapy music, things like that. So the idea of frequencies, color, things like that to me are hugely important.
Yes, and the idea of therapy, that is really great. Because what I love about art, love about music, we interpret it the way we wish.
Yeah.
We feel it the way we wish. It's not words. You know, with all of the art that I've created here, when people look at it, they're drawn to the piece that works for them. No one is telling them, you know, I have this idea and concept, and these are the words, and follow my 5 steps to success. It's just that they're drawn to it organically.
Yeah.
And that is, then they get to interpret it like music or crystals or anything. They get to interpret the way they want to, and I find that that's just really intimate and lovely and great.
For years, that is... I did avant-garde music, very, very emotive in its root, things like that, much more arrangement of sound and sonics than melody and harmony.
Lovely.
You say lovely. A lot of people, like my dad, were like, whoa, why don't you write something with a beat you could dance to? And I'm like, well, you know, the important thing is that it moved you. Whether you liked it or not, it evoked an emotion from you. So mission accomplished for me. As the artist.
Yes, that is so true. That's exactly it. If I look at something, or it maybe it is something that brings up some kind of strong feeling of even disgust, or brings up some kind of feeling that maybe I'm just not comfortable with, it's been successful.
Yeah.
Because art, for me, in that regard, is designed to expand awareness, expand consciousness. If I look at something and I go, oh, great, I saw that before, or, oh, it doesn't resonate in any kind of way that is invoking some kind of inspirational thought, it doesn't succeed. So if it's doing that, if it's churning up something within me that is like, wow, I didn't really think about that, or wow, I have this feeling about that, that has value. And I really put a lot of my own emotions into this, and then, of course, it's fun to watch other people react to it.
Absolutely. And let's go ahead and show the audience a piece real quick. I would like them to see one.
Yeah, so this is an example.
So very much, once again, sacred geometry at its finest. I have always been fascinated by Metatron and things like that.
Yes.
Many of the seals, sigils, and to see much of this same geometry incorporated in your work. How do you begin a piece?
So each of these pieces is really based on the energy of a person. So they're all inspired by a person. Sometimes they are inspired by a general concept or idea. And then what I do is I basically say, okay, universe, you tell me what's going on here. What is it that I'm to do? And then I get a kind of like an inspiration. It comes up in my upper right field of vision in my mind. And then I start drawing it. I draw the basic shape of it. So the basic shape of it can be seen in the line drawing.
Yeah.
Whatever, I'm moving my finger too quickly. There it is. So the line drawing of it is this structure. And then what I do is then I put into the line drawing the tonality of it, so the black and white halftone. And then once I feel that I've got enough contrast, movement, energy, etc. going on, then I reflect on the coloration. And then the colors start building in, and then that takes time. And they come in waves, and I just continue to build on that. And as we talked about briefly before, once that is completed, I can feel it organically. You know, I think one of the things with art is you have to know when to stop, right?
Yes.
So when I get to a point where I energetically feel like a rush of energy, I know I'm done. And then here is another one. I think this is one of the ones that you were also...
that one resonated with me hugely. And I think part of it may just be the color scheme, quite honestly. I'm a Cajun by upbringing, so immediately, as you can tell, I am drawn to Mardi Gras colors.
Yes. Purple. Yes, you are.
Purple, green, yellow.
So this was created for an ET experiencer.
Wow.
So a person who is an experiencer who is quite noteworthy in their own right, this is their piece.
Okay.
And so for you to respond to that at MUFON, because we're all part of this little group of ET experiences, for you to respond to it in that way, that's fascinating to me because it all, again, connects.
Well, and I will tell you my personal story. This was actually the piece that resonated with me. Lee gave me a sheet with numerous pieces on it, no descriptions, and just said, which one speaks to you? And out of the second page, this is the one that I found. And interestingly enough, the meaning of it, the universe adorns me with its magnificence. I live in the paradise of my own creation. One of the big messages of this show, Lee, is manifestation, and the idea that we are locked in a paradigm in this world of believing that we can't. Which is a horrible place to be, like, emotionally as a people.
And I think one of the things too is to look at, so if something isn't working, something's being served by the thing that's not working. In other words, there's a lot of people who are afraid of success. There's a lot of people who are afraid of being famous because they don't want to target on their back, or they don't want to be known, or they want to be found out, or they don't want everybody to understand their business or follow them or lose their anonymity or whatever. There are so many reasons why we have what we have. And I think one of the most important concepts for any of us is to have what you have. This is what I have. I am single. I have that I am single. I have that I am this age. And own it.
Own it.
You know, I love Quentin Crisp the other day. I saw an interview of him all the way back in 1982. And he was being interviewed by somebody, by David Letterman. And David Letterman was asking, well, don't you want to fit in? And he goes, no, I don't want to fit in. He goes, why would I lie about who I am? What is that? What does that do? What does that serve? He said, let them discover me or not. And I thought, this is just brilliant. Because if I think there's two things for me in my life that are absolutely essential. One is living in the question of, who am I? Every day, who am I? Who am I in this day? Who am I in this moment? Who am I in this whatever? And then the next step is, am I doing that? Am I true to whatever that happens to be? If I am that, everything works.
Well, it's kind of the idea of great to give yourself the the smiley affirmation in the mirror in the morning, but if you don't follow that up, if you don't look for that affirmation throughout your day, you've missed that.
You can't. So one of the things in holistics I think is really important is to be authentic. Because if I were to kind of like, and there's a whole bunch of things that in holistics too about owning your shadow, shadow work is really important. Because when people don't own that part of themselves, they project that. And then they project that in a way that then makes it about the other person and controlling their actions. Let me tell you how I feel better if you do the following. Let me tell you how I will be less uncomfortable if you do the following. Instead of really looking at their own behaviors. So all of us have the right to be ourselves. That's God-given. And if we're not doing it, that's on us. That's our responsibility. So all of these pieces come out of this kind of, I don't know, is this moment in my life where I had so many hardships, where I was like, okay, what is it? I tried this, I tried that, I tried everything else. None of these things worked. Universe, tell me, what is it I need to do? And then it came in.
Wow. Now, was it the fact that you were a student of sacred geometry before you started this work?
Not really. No, I mean, I have a degree from Pratt Institute, a degree in art direction way back when, and I had worked in marketing, etc. And then I lost a business of 20 years, and a lot of hardships and a lot of bad things happened to me. And I was trying to figure out what to do next, and I had a friend of mine who was very ill. He had cancer, and he said to me, I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you when I go. And I was like, how are you going to do this? I'm going to help you. So I was working on this design for this person who was looking at what is it to be successful and single? Like, how is it that we can celebrate? We have rings on our fingers when we're married, but what is it to celebrate being single? And the very first sacred geometric form was connected to that, but connected to him. I went to his wake. I'm there. I'm driving. I can feel the energy. I look up in my mind's eye and I see that symbol. So that symbol, that little bit of happy, is the logo. And that kind of began the ball rolling on this. So that logo, I found out years later, matches the design of Atlantis.
Oh, wow.
Almost to the letter. So in Mauritania, there's theories about Mauritania, but there's this whole thing about Plato or Aristotle, the description of Atlantis. That fits it.
Yeah, the 3 rings.
Yes, yeah, because it goes right. If you were to take this and grid it over it, it matches it exactly.
Wow.
And that's how it began.
Wow. Incredible. And it was, once again, was it the fact of your connection to frequency, your connection to these things?
I've always had a strong connection to it. Now, I've had a strong connection to frequency, and yes, formally sacred geometry, no. But when I was a child, I loved Etch-a-Sketch.
Okay.
And after that, spirograph. And I would work with spirograph endlessly. My parents thought that I was crazy.
I was going to ask if your work was spirographic in inspiration.
Yes. Yeah, in the beginning it was.
I got my son a metal spirograph. I don't know if you know they came out with that, but the 50th anniversary version is all metal cogs.
Oh, I got to try that.
Oh, it's all they don't crack. They don't get all worn out.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I would be like,
it's incredible. Incredible. But now, you have other works that you've done with people that coordinate with star systems.
Yes.
How did those come about? Let's go ahead and show one of those.
Right. So this one is this came in with that one there. You can see the artwork. And so I had created that art for this person, I don't know, maybe 4 years ago. And when I did it, I looked at it and went, I think there's something else going on here. Now, prior to that moment, I didn't really think there was a stellar connection. Like, I just didn't really think that was a thing. But when I looked at, and I kept looking, I was like, I have to look at this. So I looked at local constellations, and this is part of the Matariki Star Nebula or the Pleiadian star system. And I said to this person, I went, why don't you go ahead and read the starseed information, see if it resonates with you? And they were blown away. They said to me, that's me. I mean, and it's so specific. And one of the specific examples was that you will be greeted by a tall interdimensional being or extraterrestrial when you're between some age. I don't know, it was like 5 and 9. Well, that happened to them.
Wow.
In the way, and then the other kind of general characteristics. So I was like, okay. So that is one example. But there are others that have happened.
And was it the fact of you were already aware of starseed, things like that, when you made that?
I was a little aware of it. I've since become much more aware of it.
Okay.
Starseed information came to me about 4 or 5 years ago. Prior to that, I really didn't know much about it.
Okay.
I remember reading a little bit about the Orion, my big bald head, big eyes. I have that whole Orion thing going on. And I was like, I really feel this really is pretty accurate. I mean, this is pretty close to who I am. Sense of humor, mathematician, but kind of wild too, like this whole combo pack. And that was my introduction. But beyond that, the 33 common ones, whatever they are, there's just such an incredible, now there's so, like from blue avians and it's just endless. It's like a whole science at this point. That came much later.
Yeah. And when you're making these, when you are actively creating your art, how is it the fact of you have a starting point from somebody when you start up a piece for someone?
Yeah, I pretty much, when I meet somebody, I get imagery immediately. And the imagery seems to be structurally referential to their essence. So one of the things that I've kind of noticed is, so when people do ayahuasca or psilocybin or et cetera, they see the matrix structures.
Sure.
They see all of and they're all sacred geometry.
Yeah, the fractal nature
of the universe is really sacred geometry. And that's my opinion, at least.
Sure.
And then on top of that, schizophrenics, for example. Schizophrenics, as they become degenerative, then they're basically moving out of this orientation in reality into the more cosmic.
Well, almost fragmented
cosmic, exactly. So we see all the pieces assembled. We see the puzzle pieces assembled.
Yeah.
They see the puzzle pieces.
Yeah.
And they see the puzzle pieces in a way that kind of makes it look very kind of chaotic or loopy, or they don't know what's going on. But we see them and we go, oh, this is all that. But it's not. It's just this. We're seeing the puzzle pieces arranged based on our perspective, our belief systems, our orientation. That's how we're doing it. Of course, everybody sees everything a little differently, but that's why. So the structural mechanisms, the backbone of our reality is really created out of these geometric forms of fractals, I think, created by tetrahedron-like little things driven by energetic thought or intention. So everything is being manifested out of these pre-existing ideas. So you could call the structural systems the universe, or what people might call God, and you can say the mechanisms that move those things around, either the coming from consciousness, collective consciousness, or the organic intention of the original idea. So in other words, if I suspend my control, I can flow with the energy of life in a way that then allows for better outcomes.
Yeah.
And but the structural devices of those things, those mechanisms, those formulas, if you would, have a geometric representation. Those geometric representations, when people who have ordered one of these look at them, brings the person back into the original factory settings free of fear. Because all of these are free of fear. These are all representational ideas independent of fear that bring the person back into their own self in a way that lets them understand their greater value without doubting.
Well, even the fact of the mantra.
Yes.
That is given with each one that kind of explains the energy behind it and the representation of the image. That it's such a beautiful thing to give somebody, just that one sentence to be able to ingrain in your head.
And what I love about it is the affirmation is the affirmation. In other words, the affirmation affirms why you wanted that in the first place.
Yes.
It's not just that it's an affirmation in a sense that empowers you with whatever it is that you're working on. It's an affirmation in, yes, you chose correctly.
Well, even the fact,
which is wild to me. Because
even the fact of, once again, the concept of manifestation and getting people to understand their place as a cog in the universe is a big part of this show, and why I do this show. I love talking about. Well, I could sit back and probably talk with 4 or 5 dudes about conspiracy theories all day long, I guess. Right. I don't know to what end, Lee.
Right.
For me, it's the fact of let's demystify this. Let's get to the point of empathy, of understanding why somebody believes something they believe because of their experience. And that's why I love coming to MUFON Con, is because, there is a full realm of experiencer here. I sponsor a lot of shows across the country, quite a few in Texas, a lot of cryptid cons, things like that, where, hey, I have had my own religious epiphanies and moments of beauty in the universe where I was connected in a totally different way than anybody else in that room at that time. Nobody else experienced that but me.
Yes.
It can be hard to share that. It can be hard to let that truth be known sometimes.
Yeah, it is. It's not being, and it isn't easy being an individual. But we're social beings. We want to be parts of groups. We want to be connected. We want to be loved. And,
we want to be affirmed.
We want to be affirmed.
Yeah.
And, if we're doing something that isn't necessarily acceptable, even though it has great value, well, you can hold back on it. You can become a pioneer.
Yeah.
And what's so interesting to me is that success, like what I would call finding your purpose. We'll call it finding your purpose.
Sure.
Finding your purpose is just living whatever it is that is you. Yeah. And the rest comes out of that. Like all of this. So I had like about 4 or 5 years ago, I was just sort of frustrated with things and I wanted to be some kind of positive something. And I was tired of complaining about it. I was like, I'm just sick of complaining about it. Course of Miracles began the same way. Course of Miracles began with 2 people, if you're familiar with it, coming out of the, I think it was 70s. 2 people from, I think they were NYU, a woman and man, and both therapists. And they were like, we need to do something here. And then they started channeling out Course of Miracles. What I find fascinating is the Course of Miracles book got published, and then the woman who channeled it died. She did her job, basically. Yeah. So when we're frustrated and upset about something, we have choices. We can kind of like say, okay, what is it within me and my purpose that I can then become the thing that I feel is the counterpoint to this? Or do I just want to live in complaint and all of that?
Yeah.
You know, and if you want to live in complaint and if you want to live in that kind of pain, then that's what you're going to attract. Because if I want to complain about things and I'm always have things to complain about, then I'm going to get this, that, and the other thing. Next thing you know, I'm sick and I'm whatever. So, or I can celebrate and be in my joy of, okay, this is what's concerning me, but I can do the following.
Yeah.
Which is what you do.
Well, precisely. And that's just it. Like it is a conscious decision every day to wake up.
Absolutely.
You could wake up and go, man, it's Monday. It sucks. You know?
Exactly.
And I've had that job. I've definitely had a cubicle life at one point in my life. I don't know that I could ever go back to that now that I've seen the other side, Lee. Yeah. Even the world of broadcast, things like that. Like, I prefer my hacking through the jungle Indiana Jones freelance lifestyle where it's let me hunt the next gig. Yeah. You know,
because
there's something to it.
You know, so somebody says, well, you know, I'm just going to become myself. And then out of that, they kind of create this meme of success and attraction. And everybody's like, okay, I'm going to wear the hair the way that they do and the bracelets the way that they do and the clothing. And I'm going to drive the car that they car, whatever. But that's all external stuff. And then it's just second fiddle to somebody else's concepts. What is it that's true for them? What is it that they want to do? What is it that they want to resonate with? And then everybody eventually goes, wow, that's really great. I want to be like them. Sometimes you have to be your own, like you just have to be find your own way. You have to be your own inspiration in a way. You have to find your own path in a way. And then eventually things click along and then you find your tribe and other people who feel the same way and you're off. But that desert, like what they would call, you know, the days in the desert, the days of the journey, that is hard. But that's what really shows the universe and to the person you were worth your own efforts in your own being and becoming and being your authentic self. And as a reward, here you go.
Well, and especially with artwork like this, where you're working with experiencers, you're working with people that have had these fully energetic experiences. And the more I talk with people like Kathleen Martin, Sev Talk, people on the experience or resource team with MUFON, the more it is the fact, and it makes perfect sense as far as physics. Like these are high vibrational fields.
Yep.
These are plasmic fields. Those change things. And to have been in the presence of that will change you. It'll change the way you vibrate, period.
Absolutely. And one of the things, and we mentioned this, is when I was, this is really kind of a tell on the connection to ET world. So there is that one piece that's done. You can see the art, and then to the side of that, you can see its orientation.
From Booties.
The constellation, which is the Arcturian starseed. So this was done back in 2019, and about 4 weeks later, this popped up in some field in Western England. So when I did I do work in intuition too, and I was brought in to do an investigation into a ghost viewing with a person who is pretty well known in the New York area. And I'm going upstairs, and we're doing investigation, and we're trying to figure out, this is a 18th, like, I think it was built in the late 1700s. And we're upstairs in this attic, and it's kind of wild. And then all of a sudden, everything dies. Like the Coleman lamp dies, and then all of the electronics goes wonky, and the temperature drops.
Wow.
And, you know, and the signals are going off. So this person who was doing this has a lot of equipment. And I was they were really their investigation per se. I was just brought in as a kind of an advisor. So I'm there with them, and they're doing this. And then the person who's leading this asks questions of a thing called a spirit box. And for those who don't know what that is, that's basically a box that extrapolates out of radio signals, different kinds of words and phrases. And it does seem to have value. I mean, a lot of times it's just nonsense, but then you'll hear a clear word. So we went through a whole series of questions about who is up here. Is it the captain, which was the guy, or is it this person or that person? It was just like nothing, or just no response, like nothing. And then the person goes on a totally different tangent. We were not getting into ET stuff. We were not going to go into that realm. He asks, is this extraterrestrial? Yes. You hear, like, the electronic digital version of it was like, yes. Like and it was, I remember thinking, this is great. Like this is happening. And I'm looking around the people, like, we're all like, oh my goodness. So then he started rattling off star systems, and he goes, are you part of the Zeta, blah, blah, blah. And you hear, yes. And then he goes, okay. And it was this time the yes was clearer. So then he goes through a bunch of other questions and nothing. And then he goes, do you know anybody in this room? Lee.
Ooh.
So I was the person.
Wow.
Who they identified. And now we're all like, and I went, wait a second, did everybody hear that?
Yeah.
Because did that just happen? So they're asking this. Then what, then he goes, and I'm just stupefied at this point. He goes, what are you doing with Lee? Give him information. And they're like, what do you mean information? Art. Like that.
Wow.
So who knows what's real, but that there is, I am a part of an experiencer group. And the people who are in, many of them at least, are in that group, they do connect to this art in a kind of really visceral way, much the way that you do it, in fact. One in particular, really. And I think it's kind of what I really think. So in the friend-a-foe part of this for the symposium.
Sure.
Let's go with the friend part. Some people have said that really, if you were to look at ET world as a religion, if they were looking at traditional religion, their goal is, let us raise the vibration. If we raise the vibration, we can give a voice. So think of wisdom as a disembodied consciousness trying to find an outlet.
Sure. Sophia.
Right? Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's trying to find an outlet. If I can raise the vibration of the mechanisms that can then bring that into fruition, mission accomplished.
Yeah.
Because now what I've done is I've taken something that was just kind of floating out there, I've given it a voice, and now it's raising.
You've given it a conduit.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's exactly what we are.
Yeah, you've cleared
so
a
their
path.
interest, if I would, my feeling at least, their interest is not in we become mechanisms of that. And they want that because it serves everything.
Yeah.
It raises everything. And every single being that has that, doing that is affecting, because all systems are open, is affecting everything else. And it's such a way to really, really drive things up. So who knows, maybe through this observation, this is just one little teeny piece of the puzzle. Because I came online with this, because I never really had a passion about this stuff before.
You have an incredible passion for this.
Yes,
Lee.
This is my jam, man. I mean, I'm like loving it. So with this, this intensity, this is then going to be brought to something, and then it triggers another person and another person, another person, and I really love to hear other people's stories. I love to hear other people's. There is a woman who was on, who I really, I just get that she's the real deal, and she was so animated about these because she said to me that I saw these on the ship.
Interesting.
So she said she saw them on the ship, and she said they're spheres. So let me just talk about this. You're looking at a two-dimensional item, right?
Yeah.
There are three-dimensional items with pulsation, color change, and sound. They move, and I do a screen capture of them. I just got to pop them. She did, and I actually heard this from somebody else. These are tools on the ship when this is just her perspective. So sometimes when the children are being brought on, and they're being brought on for evaluation, or maybe they're going to harvest some kind of, they're going to harvest like some kind of donor egg, et cetera. So they bring them in, and sometimes they're all like freaked out.
Yeah.
So what they do is they give them this game, and the game is that. So these things float. They come into them, and then the way that the woman described it is that as she's looking at this thing, the girls, the little other hybrid people are laughing at her, and they're telepathically telling her, no, you don't talk about it. You have to think it. You have to think what it is that you want. And so she thought of a flower, and immediately the thing morphed, and she got an entire description of life forms and how they grow, and then the thing started growing, this life form that she was interested in.
Oh.
It's an educational tool. So these, from her perspective, and are nothing more than little kind of, if you would, learning tools that the person, like a flashcard.
Yeah, each one's like a program.
It's a program. It's a three-dimensional program that morphs into whatever it is that consciousness is thinking to show the person what it is that they need to know, to educate them through this experiential interaction, which also is done energetically. I mean, it's way beyond my abilities.
That is fun. Deep and thick,
yes.
Lee. And now we have you for a couple more minutes. How does this artwork affect you? I always find it interesting to, I guess it's because my process whenever I am making music is very energetic.
Yes.
There have been there was one person who became my bandmate, one out of the many, many years of playing with other people with electronic music, and he was the only one that when we were done, not only said, as most people do, like, wow, that was weird. Like, did you feel that? Yes. That was weird.
Yes.
His question after was, do you think we could do that again? And I was like, oh, I guarantee you I can make that happen again. Like what you just felt while we were making that. Like, oh, yeah. Like, you're the first person to ever ask me to do it again.
Yeah.
Most people are like, one and done. They're like, wow, that was intense. I don't know if I could handle another 3-hour session like that.
Yeah. So every time that I do it, I go through the same kind of, I have the blank slate, and then I have the image pop in, and I start, and then I kind of get a little freaked out, like, will I be able to do this? And then it starts coming in. But all of them always wrap up with the same energetic burst. I mean, I get such a rush of energy at the end. I'm like pulsating, and at the very end, I kind of almost let out a yell. I kick my head back, and I don't scream, but I kind of like make this very primal, like because I'm releasing whatever it is, and then I'm done.
Wow.
And then I do it all over again. And I do it all over, and each of them imprint on me. So every single thing is building upon itself. And all of the different concepts and ideas start latticing outwardly to grow a greater understanding structurally to support bigger ideas.
We just interviewed Jan Nassari at the International Remote Viewing Association. He was there with a booth talking about carbonic certainty.
Oh.
And the idea that we are carbonic beings. We're carbon. His hashtag is hashtag diamond vehicle. Like, you could be a charcoal, you could be a diamond. The only difference is the pressure that it takes to make the diamond. So don't be afraid of the pressure.
Exactly.
Don't be afraid of it. But it was really interesting hearing his philosophy of, because of the fact that we are carbon, we are exhaling carbon all the time.
Yes.
And every bit of that carbon, the same way you can program a piece of quartz, what have you, every bit of that is programmed with our vibration.
Yes.
And that is going out into the world, positive or negative. So the idea of you actively birthing that out of you with your breath at the end is fantastic and beautiful and amazing, because his whole concept is the fact of you have the option and choice to be reborn with every breath.
Yes.
Every breath. Yes. You have that option.
Yes, it's
to find a whole new you and to program the world in a whole different way around you.
I remember I had a vocal coach, because I used to be singing when I was younger, and she used to say, when you sing out into eternity.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I want to thank you so much for coming on. Your energy in there was absolutely amazing, as well as the energy of your work. Look here at the camera. Let everybody know where they can go to get in touch with you, because you do private work. You do private art for people to help boost their energetic field. So let everybody know where they can go to find you and find your art.
We currently, it's called Soulful Symbols, but they haven't converted it over. So if you look at www.soulfulmandalas.com, because originally that was the name. So it's MANDALAS, mandalas.com. And all the information is there. Or you can see me also on Instagram, where it's soulful_mandalas. But, and then keep up with what's going on. I am in the process of developing some products just to kind of, I feel like it's the kids, like they're the kids. I need to get the kids out there. And we're going to continue to develop it. But this is our very first show I really have ever done with a friend of mine. And we're continuing to grow it.
It's fantastic. I love it. So amazing. While you are online checking out everything from Soulful Symbols, soulfulmandalas.com, make sure to stop on by curiousrealm.com. That is where you can find all the episodes. That's where you can like, follow, subscribe. That's where you can find our YouTube channel. All the YouTube channels of our guests are there as well. Also, all of the books from our guests are right there at curiousrealm.com/store. Stay tuned through these commercial messages, folks. We'll be right back with our continuing coverage of Day 1 of MUFON Symposium 2023 right here in Covington, Kentucky. We'll be right back after this. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our continuing coverage of MUFON 2023, the symposium right here in Covington, Kentucky. Our guest in this segment is Barbra Sobhani, and you were here actively presenting on the physical affects of people after UFO, UAP experiences. That is one of the things that I love talking about on this show. Especially with all of the very interesting science coming out in the world of UFO, UAP study. How did you first get into the world of UFO, UAP study, Barbara?
Well, literally since birth. My father, John Schuessler, founded MUFON. So I was present from the very beginning.
Wow.
Now, and I was just thinking the other day, like, what is my first real memory of MUFON and MUFON symposiums in particular, and it was the 1980 symposium that was held in Texas. That's like the first one I really remember going to session. There you go. Really remember thinking, wow, okay, this is this thing that my dad does.
Wow. Yeah, my dad sold tires, so I don't know if a convention would have been the same for us.
Maybe not.
But, I mean, with a life steeped in this, when did you first begin actual work and study in the field?
That's a great question. I think because it was really sort of part of the family business, so to speak. I helped my dad with things along the way, growing up, even in the Cash Landrum case. That's, the case that really consumed much of his work and his life.
It was a big one. That happened right in my backyard when I was a kid. I grew up in Crosby, Kennefic, Texas. So it was literally right down the road. I was born in 1975. I was a kid when it happened.
Right.
I remember hearing about it, things like that. And it is one of the many cases where, they the families suffered burns, all kinds of effects afterward.
Right. And because of the really quite severe effects that they had following their encounter, I think that's where it sort of brought it to my attention very early on. Because here's a case that really our whole family was involved in helping with the investigation.
Wow.
You know, my mom transcribed all of the interviews for that case. We got to know the family very well. I think because of that early interaction, that is why looking at this aspect has always been important. So, you know, even as a young person, I saw firsthand what can happen. And, you know, my thought was, as we go forward with this UFO investigation and getting involved in cases and really understanding that has to be a part of what we do. Try to better understand what's happening and how people can be helped.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, we've had Sev talk on regularly talking about the experiencer resource team, things like that.
Right.
But this falls much more in the realm of the STAR team, the people who go out and physically investigate after reports have been taken in to take soil samples, radiation, things like that. Not a lot of people realize that there are different teams within MUFON that handle different aspects of the investigation.
Yes, absolutely.
And that really kind of helps some investigators not get so personally involved as things move down the line. It preserves much more of an evidentiary chain, things like that.
And, you know, that's another part of how I've stayed involved in MUFON through the years as well. You know, during the time that my dad was the international director, I, because of my background in, at the time, just physics, and now I have degrees in physics, geophysics, and biology, sort of keep expanding my knowledge base. But at the time, at the time, you know, with my physics background, he's like, you know, let's dig back into our training manuals. Let's make sure that, you know, what we're doing and how we're training our field investigators covers the things that it needs to cover.
Yeah.
And so I did help with that early on as well. So I've always been doing a lot of behind the scenes.
Fingers in a lot of MUFON pies.
A lot of behind the scenes work. Well, absolutely.
Let's get into specifically the Cash Landrum case, because once again, that one being in my backyard as a kid has always fascinated me. And I didn't even realize till Texas UFO Con last year, Nick Redfern gave a talk on the associations between the Cash Landrum case and Rendlesham Forest. They both happened on the same night.
Right.
And I never knew that, never realized it, and had never really heard the hypothesis until that point that it was possibly an alien reproduction vehicle gone wrong, which would fully explain the 10, 12 military helicopters that were closely following it.
Right. Actually, there's 21 total.
Yeah. And and material spewing out of the craft, things like that. So let's get into the case a little bit.
All right, so you know, you've alluded to a couple really important details about this case. You know, these three folks were just driving home, in an area you're familiar with. So, you know, long straight roads.
It's pretty country, yeah.
Really out there, you know, there's nowhere to go when something happens. And so as these folks were driving down, and Colby in the back seat was like, "What's that?" You know, and Betty and Vicky were chatting and, you know, whatever, and then they realized Colby was starting to get really upset. And they looked, and then they saw there's something coming down over the road. And so that's when they stopped. That's when Betty got out of the car, you know, and that 10 minutes or so that she was out of the car and that they were in close proximity to this craft of whatever origin it was, it changed their lives. And, that was a big part of really trying to dig in and figure out what it was. Is there someone that can be held responsible or not? That was a big part of the after investigation and the work that my dad did. And it does appear that the craft was malfunctioning. And, so that brings up the question in my mind, like, was the damage that they received physically because it was malfunctioning? Yeah. Or was it just because they were in close proximity and they shouldn't have been? But the fact that there were 21 helicopters present in even closer proximity to the craft than these folks, most likely there were effects of those pilots as well.
Oh, absolutely.
And so if what appeared to be sort of these helicopters were trying to shepherd it out of the area. Yeah. And then there was pretty good tracking that this object had moved along and then moved off into the Gulf, and
which would be going at least from that direction pretty well directly over Ellis Air Force Base, right down near Galveston, where they have all the air shows. It basically happened pretty well right in between Lackland and Ellis. So
right. And then there's Ellington Field, not too far south of there as well.
Yeah,
right.
And quite a few areas that 21 choppers could have taken off from. I'm from the West Houston area. We have a huge staging ground for the National Guard, all kinds of things.
Right.
So all of that in pretty close proximity.
Yeah, and a lot of work was done to try to verify, if possible, where those helicopters were deployed from. And of course, no one admitted to having they even
choppers in the air.
Well, and not only that, one of the folks that my dad talked with, told him, "Oh, well, we don't deploy our choppers at night ever." He's like, really?
How do you do a nighttime training exercise?
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We only chopper things during the day in the military.
Right. And yes, it's just silly, right?
That's ridiculous. That's
silly.
ridiculous.
Like, you can't. But I think they were hoping, we'll tell them this and they'll go away.
Yeah.
Right, and not worry about it. But finding help for Betty, Vicky, and Colby, that was, yes, there's a lot of question about the incident itself and the craft and what happened, but ultimately these folks were injured.
Yeah.
And there needed to be some accountability.
Well, and it came down to a mountain of physical evidence, burn marks on the road, dead trees, all kinds of things, melted asphalt, injuries to them, radiation burns, and
and physical effects to the car. I mean, there was lots. This is a case, and I think that's why it really stood out in so many ways. There's just an immense amount of physical evidence.
Yeah, really, one of the only cases prior to that, there was, of course, Pascagoula, things like that beforehand, but Betty and Barney Hill was really one of the only ones with that much physical evidence.
Right, absolutely.
And the physical evidence, even going into his life, later going into Colby's life, he was affected for years.
Yes, absolutely.
And if I'm not mistaken, that actively led to a lawsuit, correct?
Yes. So
this was far before the Area 51, you've been burning materials near our city lawsuit.
Right.
Where people first sued the military and said, hey, you've been burning stuff and it's been hurting us, and they had to admit Area 51 existed.
Right. And unfortunately, the lawsuit was not successful. There's a lot of powers at work there. But we have documentation from one of the memos from the Air Force that we received. It clearly says these folks were exposed to radiation. And here's their physical effects. And but it didn't go the next step to say, well, yes, and we were involved, and we, it just says, okay, here's the report.
Yeah.
Here's what happened. But they made it clear, like, yes, these folks were injured. They were exposed to radiation.
Wow. And how did that, let's get into the affect of their life afterward, because it's always hard for any experiencer, but when it's been a physical experience like that, it compounds things in a different way.
Absolutely. I mean, really all three of their lives were changed forever. You know, prior to this, Betty was, you know, she was a business owner, very, you know, she's a tough lady, you know. Yeah. And after the incident, based on her level of illness over the years, it completely changed her life. She no longer could run her businesses, and it changed her. You know, I mean, clearly the immediate after effects of the exposure were very severe. You know, chunks of hair falling out, blisters all over the body.
Yeah.
You know, nausea, all of the things that really an intense
extreme radiation poisoning.
Right. In an intense dose of radiation, she had all of those symptoms just following.
Were they able to tell what kind of radiation?
And you know, that is the interesting question, and one of the things that my dad tried to pull in as many specialists as he could to try to help figure that out.
Sure.
Because at the time, you know, there were not other cases where you had this sort of really direct correlation. Very visceral. Right.
And extreme amounts of physical evidence that you can tap into.
Right. So, you know, between the physical effects to the witnesses, the physical effects to the car, the dashboard was melted.
Yep.
Later, the windshield to the car just randomly shattered later. And then the road, as you mentioned, so the road was melted, and then not very long after that, Texas Department of Transportation came and removed that whole section.
Cleared it all out.
Yep, removed the section of the road.
Amazing how fast they did that, but all the surrounding roads are still under construction.
Right, exactly. Like,
Still, like I'm almost 50 and they're still under construction over there.
Yes. So, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And now, Colby, let's get into him a little bit, because he was very young when this happened.
Correct.
Are you still in contact with Colby? Do you?
My dad is still in contact with Colby. And you know, he kept in touch, and actually pretty close contact with all of the folks. Of course, Betty and Vicky have both passed, but he is still in contact with Colby.
Wow. And how has his life come about from this?
Well, I mean, again, it changed him. You know, he was a boy that loved to be outside, loved to, you know, run in the woods and do the things. And then after this event, that just all changed. And then, you know, of course, physically, you know, the effects of this exposure changed him as well. And you know, for a lot of his life, he's still a very private person. You know, and it's really, for us as a family, you know, it's been more about, you know, making sure that they're all right. And you know, and protecting their privacy as much as they want. And you know, it's tragic. You know, and like I said, these folks are changed forever.
And that is the experience that I hear more and more and more. I've interviewed tons of people, and I don't know anybody that their experience started out like a song, where it was a great experience. It starts out like a Disney movie, like first 5-10 minutes or something bad may happen. We're going to change and evolve throughout the story, and we will end on a happy note. But so many people with experiences, it shakes them to the core. Barbara. Have you ever had an experience yourself?
Certainly never an experience like that.
Sure.
The only experience I've had was sort of just, you know, an unusual light in the sky that I knew for sure was not, you know, I'm a trained observer in terms of the night sky.
And physicist.
So, and I've spent a lot of time outdoors, a lot of time looking at the sky, a lot of time helping others learn about the night sky, do a lot of, that type of work with astronomy. And I did have, I was walking home at night, late at night, looking at the stars, and there was very, very high altitude, very fast moving red object that I crossed all the way across the sky.
Wow.
So, and, that was it.
Okay.
It wasn't anything, but it is one of those things like, I know all of the things that was not.
Yeah, precisely, which is really the important thing, to know what it's not.
Right.
And that we, on this show, I explain to people all the time, I could probably sit down and talk with people about conspiracy theories all day. I prefer to get down to nitty-gritty and start breaking things apart and really demystify topics for people and try to make it to where it is explainable and palatable for everybody. And this is one of the topics right now that has finally been busted open in our country.
Right.
We finally have a dialogue going on it. It's no longer a point of ridicule the way it used to be. Right. Even last year with the symposium being Friend or Foe 1.0, how did the media treat things? Now it's Friend or Foe 2.0. How is the military and the media treating things? Even the recent whistleblower testimony where they thanked the media for their hand-in-hand cooperation. And it was like, wow. Like since 47?
Yeah, right. Right.
But even then, it's one of those, in 47, we were still in full trust of our government.
Sure.
We didn't have things like the Pentagon Papers yet showing us that we got into Vietnam illegally. We didn't have things like if Iran-Contra happened, our grandparents would have demanded heads.
Right.
They would have ridden people out of town and out of their jobs on a rail if that happened.
Right.
And it's interesting to see that conversation now open, to see the media using terms like UFO denier.
Right. And it is a huge shift. And again, even thinking about, how open can investigators be? MUFON is not my full-time job.
No,
right?
It's nobody's full-time job. Everybody's volunteer.
Right, exactly. So being able to be involved, be open about being involved.
That's right.
And push for more investigation, more support, more, and for particularly for cases like, the Cash Landrum case. It was still the giggle factor back then, right? Like any kind of suggestion that was a UFO that harmed those folks was, it can't be that. But maybe it was, and maybe it wasn't.
Sure.
At this point, we can't tell, and we don't know.
At that point, the government was doing a lot of things trying to make nuclear-powered aircraft, all kinds of stuff.
Right. So it could have been, and so it's not really about that, but that giggle factor impacted how folks took them seriously or not.
How doctors took them seriously.
Absolutely.
Everything.
How doctors, which is why, it's important for the investigator to know, okay, these are the folks that I need to go to for these specialties. When these kinds of things happen, I need to put these people in touch with the folks who are going to take them seriously. Yeah. Right. And know how to follow up.
Absolutely. Right. And that is the two of the things I hold and talk about all the time about MUFON on this show is all volunteer.
Yep.
Believe it or not, folks, that is one of the most important things about MUFON, because as soon as you have somebody drawing a salary, that means you are beholden to who gives you the money.
Right.
It means your research is now beholden to who gives you the money.
Sure.
So the fact that it's all volunteer is a beautiful, amazing thing, because it really does leave that door blown wide open. You are not beholden to anyone about the data that you put out, and that's awesome, because good God, what was it, the head of Princeton that just retired? It was either Princeton or Caltech, because he had loaded six or seven studies that came out of the university. It came out that wasn't fully the case, but even the appearance of impropriety destroys those studies.
Right.
and destroys the fact of those studies.
Right.
You know, and yeah, to think that he did that for whoever was sponsoring those studies to make sure that data came out the way that they needed it to come out, which is all too often the case with studies.
Right. And so that's that, to your point. I mean, that is why, you know, I've stayed involved with MUFON all of these years because of that, right? Yeah. And having a volunteer network as well, you can bring in so many more people.
Yes.
So you have that expertise that you need in all areas. If you're limited to, 4 or 5 people that are getting paid to do the thing, then you've only got those 4 or 5 people, right? But instead, we have a well-trained group of volunteers that can jump in and get to work.
And I can imagine even some contractors in the background that are volunteers.
Sure.
Because of the fact that because they aren't getting money, they are not in violation of their agreements.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Which opens a whole door of other possibilities. The second thing that I talk about all the time is the forensic process.
Yes.
The fact that since 1969, it has been the intake process, the process of we receive your experience, we put it through the ringer, and if needed, we bring a STAR team out. If needed, we bring the ERT team out.
Right.
But all of those are separate to preserve the integrity of investigation and to preserve the integrity of the data.
Right. And the folks who volunteer to become field investigators, they go through a very rigorous training process.
I show it on air every time we talk about it. I don't have it with me, but it is 3 fingers thick, man. Yeah. It's 3 fingers thick.
Yeah, absolutely.
It goes deep into a lot of stuff.
Yep. And, and we're even thinking about, as MUFON is evolving and moving forward and as the phenomena is evolving, what more do we need to do? What other types of trainings do we need to provide for our field investigators and for our state directors and for all these folks that are doing these amazing things for MUFON? Yeah. What does MUFON then need to be doing to help keep them current and as up to date and as informed as possible? I mean, we already do a lot, but there's always more. There's always more
tons
that you can
more.
do.
Like most people do not realize the first congressional panel that happened, the majority of questions came from either MUFON cases or were curated from MUFON.
Correct.
Right. It was a lot. It was a huge amount. And my next question was actually going to be, because of the current climate and things that have changed, how will that be changing the way MUFON investigates? Will it be bringing about new forms of investigation or new channels being opened up for you guys?
Well, something that actually is a huge step forward for MUFON is we now have our own lab that is very well equipped to do all sorts of investigation, because that's been something over the years, and we've been working on developing this lab capability for quite a while. But finding in the past, finding labs that would do an analysis of trace samples of whatever types of analysis need to be done. Yeah. Are we going to get that sample back? Are we going to,
which is all too often the case, where it's like, sorry, got lost in shipping.
Right.
Randomly. It made it here, but it never made it back to you.
Right. And you may or may not get the analysis of said sample. So by having that as an asset for MUFON, again, all volunteer run, but we've been able to outfit this lab thanks to donations from folks. And we now have a really state-of-the-art way to deal with trace evidence, which is amazing. So I think that's going to be really important moving forward, because the more data-driven that we can be with investigations, the better.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. One of the things I bring up regularly is the idea of how people are affected by their experience, especially physically affected. The work of Kathleen Barden specifically, going into how people are spiritually changed, how people come back and they are healed from things. They come back and can even help heal other people. That is really remarkable to think about. And even all the new physics that we are discovering, the concept of parallel dimension, all of these things. And for me, it's the idea of a magnet near a watch. I don't have to hold a really powerful one near there to affect and permanently affect the gears that are in there.
Sure.
And yeah, if you get around any high order radio signals, things like that, they can affect you.
Right. Right.
So yeah, for me, it's the fact of vibrational technology that may be used in this to be able to cloak, hover, gravity defiance, things like that. That is very, very high order, high static field, things like that that can affect you for a long time.
And that was something that interested me and still interests me in trying to see, all right, looking back at historic cases in particular, from the reports that we have and from data that we have from some of those historic cases, can we start to glean trends in what has happened versus what is happening now? What kind of connections can we make? And we may not have all of the data that we need, but we have so much historic data that I think it's really important to start looking at that and start trying to connect the dots. Because, has there been a change in the type of technology that's visiting? Maybe there has.
Oh,
right?
sure.
And
sure.
And it would make sense. So can we see that? Can we see that in what's been reported and how it's been affecting people, how it's been affecting, other types of trace evidence? And does that give us clues about technology?
Even the familiarized phenomena around it.
Right.
The idea that in the last many years, sightings of cryptids and UFOs going up, paranormal experiences in UFOs going up, experiencers experiencing paranormal events after.
Sure.
It's interesting to think how interconnected they may all be.
And I think that's important. It's an important thing to pay attention to the wide range of phenomena.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you I'm only going to look at this one little piece of it, you're probably going to be missing half of what's going on.
And even the idea of Grush in his testimony saying, non-human intelligence, it takes it out of the box.
Right.
The problem is it's been in a box for so long.
Sure.
All of these things have been wrapped into a box called Kleenex, when really they're all different types of tissue.
Right. There you go.
And like I've heard from so many experiencers, after their experience, it's like they've realized that they've been living their life in a box. And after their experience, I never knew this world was outside of this box that I lived in.
Right.
They are connected with the world and with people in a totally different way. It's remarkable to see the change. So,
absolutely.
Thank you so much for all the work that you've done in the world of MUFON, and I'd love to have you on again and again to talk about updates and there's a whole world of technology that so many people are not aware that's coming out. I have a knowledge vault on my website full of declassified government documents, patents, all kinds of things. The fact that a year and a half ago, Lockheed Martin put out a patent for an F-16 nuclear reactor, or a nuclear reactor that fits inside of an F-16 platform, smaller than your car.
Right.
That allows for a lot of things in our skies.
Yeah.
That allows for a lot of things in our skies when people have been saying, it would take a nuclear reactor to get this kind of energy. Well, we have them. We have them.
Right. And that's why it's important to, like I said, you got to pay attention to many things.
That's right.
Many things. And it's a lot. There's,
myopic eyes see very little, Barbara.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Oh, I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah.
Let everybody know where they can keep up with your work, where they can go to join in with MUFON, help out, where they can come and help you and help provide evidence.
Yeah, well, definitely MUFON.com. If you have a sighting, please report it. Please report it. That allows us to gather that information that we need to help. Your report may confirm somebody else's report, folks. I mean, even 20, 30 years down the line, report it. Absolutely. Even, yes, if it's something that happened a long time ago, go in and report it.
Yeah.
That is the first, if something's happening, that's the first thing I do is go in and check, okay, what else has been reported?
I cannot wait until you guys start leveraging the world of AI with your database.
Right.
Oh my God, the things that are going to pop out are going to be phenomenal. So
yep.
Keep your ears tuned, folks. The world is changing around us every day with this topic. While you're online checking out everything from MUFON at MUFON.com, make sure to stop on by CuriousRealm.com. That is where you can find all the episodes. Like, follow, subscribe, share. That's where you can find the Curious Realm store. CuriousRealm.com/store is where you can buy all of the books from our authors and researchers that we have here on the show. Stay tuned after these commercial messages. We will be right back with our continuing coverage of MUFON Symposium 2023 from Covington, Kentucky, right after this. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to our continuing coverage of MUFON Symposium here in Covington, Kentucky. We have with us right now Jim Lawrence. He is a UFO UAP investigator from New Brunswick, Canada. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. It was great to run into you. You've got some amazing cases here in the printout that you have been handing out to folks. How long have you been into UFO UAP research, Jim?
Well, if you want to go clear back, I got very interested in this subject when I was 12 years old. I grew up on a family farm, and my dad it was discussing an article. Near as I can tell, it was probably they had probably seen it in probably Men's True magazine. That's the only periodical I could think that was floating through the house at the time. And I was an avid reader from the time, even preschool. I remember trying to read Superman comics. I can hardly wait till I learn how to read till I can see what these things say. And so they were talking about this UFO case where the ladies, the bunch as I can remember of it, the lady had a UFO had stopped her car or something. She had heard a little bit of telepathic messages. And my dad and the other farmer were discussing. My dad just said, well, I don't have any problem with the idea of life in outer space and on other planets. And it would just kind of hit me like a paradigm shift. Wow, I never thought of that before. That is interesting. And then from there, I've read every available thing on the subject I find. Probably to date, I've read probably between 5,000 to 10,000 books on.
Wow.
And, and at first, when reading and going through high school, I was fascinated with science fiction. I read a lot of that. And then by the time I got to grade 12, I said, okay, no more fiction, because truth is much stranger than fiction.
Yeah.
And so, and it didn't matter if I was reading true crime, spirituality. I researched acupuncture 5 years in probably 1970, 5 years before it was introduced into the U.S. And I remember I knew the mainstream medicine view on it.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, well, 3,000-year-old medicine versus 200-year-old medicine?
Yeah.
This is a no-brainer. But anyway, it was another 5 years before that even caught up. So that's kind of how I got into it. Yeah.
Yeah. And now, what brought you to actual field investigation into UFO?
Well, that was a long process. I've been reading everything I get my hands on. And keep in mind, I was 12 years old then. I'm 66 years old now. But I never told a single soul till 2 years ago that I was interested locally, that I was interested in this subject. Because I have my own business. I still work every day. And I didn't, I didn't want to,
affect your business.
I didn't want to affect my business. I felt and it didn't matter if I was for me, it could be spirituality, it could be psychics, it could be any of those subjects. But ufology was always my favorite, and still is my favorite. And so that's kind of what. So from there, for years I was reading these. What happened was in our hometown when I was about 24 years old, Stanton Friedman was coming to our town to speak. So I remember looking at the newspaper and saying to my wife, I don't care what people think. I'm going to go see that, because I was still worried about the stigma side.
Sure.
And I was worried about that till about 2 years ago. So anyway, so I'm standing in line. There's actually a fairly big crowd going this one evening, and I'm a little self-conscious. And I look up, hey, Fred, there's my accountant. Hey, how you doing? And hey, Sam, there's my electrician. Oh, I'm now more comfortable going.
Yeah.
And I'd already read many, many books on the subject, and I was blown away with Stanton about how normal he made it all sound and his depth of knowledge.
Yeah.
And so, and over the years, and keep in mind, I only live an hour away from his hometown. And so that was where I first got to know Stan. But I never really knew him until about probably on a personal basis until about 5 years before he passed away. So that's kind of where I got started. After that, about probably 15 years ago, my wife actually got for my birthday a cruise. And I thought, oh, well, this is self-serving. My wife loves cruises. He says, no, read it. And it was a UFO cruise. First one ever. She found it on Stanton's website, so I really got to know Stanton really well on this what's called UFO cruise. Since then, we've done probably 5 or 6 of those, and about that time, probably about a few years before that, there was a MUFON conference in Vegas, and I had business on Vegas that weekend. So I told my wife, I said, I was still worried about the stigma, and I said, I don't care what people think about it, but I'm going to go to that, because it was right there in that same time frame. And I was expecting people, little propellers on their head, and weird people and so on. But I was blown away at the credibility of the people on the stage: astrophysicists, scientists, CEOs of hospitals, and but I did notice nobody under 50, because at that time it was a total career breaker.
Yeah.
And though, as you know, that's changed over time, particularly since 2017.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my background. Further into ufology, going to conferences and so on. It actually, about 4 or 5 years ago, my wife and daughter want to go shopping in another city. They want me to go with them. And for the weekend, I said, I hate shopping. I said, I come up with an idea. I think I'll just go to the airport, fly to Philadelphia to a MUFON boot camp for the weekend, and chat with some like-minded people there.
Yeah.
And it was on a whim. And then, so I went to it, had a great time. On the way back, I think, I could be a field investigator for New Brunswick, and I have to go through the whole MUFON thing. I thought, well, nobody's doing it in New Brunswick. I can be a field investigator. I'll just do the MUFON later. I'll just start. There's nobody doing it, and I'll just kind of put the word out. So the cases started coming in once I started telling people what I was doing.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow, incredible. And to know that, all of 2 years ago is when you kind of confronted this part of your life and brought it forward is incredible.
Yeah, and there's a funny thing about the stigma. And I've come to the conclusion that the stigma is 90% you and 10% them. There isn't as much stigma out there as most people think.
Sure.
What I've found, and I see about 10 new customers working every week, and at the end we were kind of relaxed. I bring it up to them, and I get their reactions. And the reality is, when I have that little handout that I do, and I even use it there, and I'll hand it to them. So about roughly 10 to 15% say, "Wow, this is cool. I'm not into this, but my husband is, or my brother-in-law is."
Yep.
And then there's about roughly 30% who say, whoa, that is interesting. I never really thought about it, but you're an interesting character. And I was okay. And then about 30%, UFOs. No, who cares?
Yeah.
What's on the football game tonight? And then there's really only about 1 to 2% says, you're not going to get me to buy into that conspiracy thing. Yeah. And then that's the time you better come up with another subject.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and that's what I've been bringing up to numerous people. We have believers, non-believers that listen to this show, mainly because a lot of what we do is try to demystify topics, try to cut through the conspiracy, things like that. And I have quite a cadre of listeners that are not in the UFOs or alien camp.
Yep.
Even my father being one of them. And like I've asked him, it's like, here's the way I explain it. Were you okay with Iran-Contra? Were you okay with the Pentagon Papers? Because apparently Grush is saying something much larger money-wise has been shifting around the back doors since 1939.
Exactly.
So are you cool with them spending your money that way? Because let's just talk about the accountability if you're not cool with the technology or the concept of aliens, and worry about where the money went.
Yeah, the one I bring up the mainstream sometime is, okay, let's talk about interesting about conspiracy theories. Obviously, I think most people know that the CIA invented that term to help push off the questions that are being asked about the JFK assassination.
Yeah.
And of course, they come up with the term conspiracy theory. But most people in the general public now agree there was more than one shooter. Now, there was only one shooter for a number of years when it was kind of contained. So I always kind of use that analogy that, okay, so your ideas have changed, and that's kind of on the mainstream side before you get into this subject.
Yeah, most of the time I just go straight to the district attorney concept, and I'm like, if we don't have conspiracy theories, then we have a lot of district attorneys that need to not have a job.
That's right.
Because how are all these people convicted of conspiracy?
That's right. That's a good point.
They apparently had a conspiracy theory that they presented to the jury, and they bought it.
That's right.
So they are all conspiracy theorists, every one of them.
Okay. Yes.
But let's start cracking into a few of the cases that you have covered up there. I lived in Portland, Maine for many, many years. And,
cool.
That area right up there near Nova Scotia has numerous sightings, and especially USO sightings.
Yes, in Nova Scotia, because that's basically a water province. Halifax was there's a Shelburne naval base, and Halifax is a shipbuilding city.
Yeah.
And Chris Stiles has just brought out a new book about the Shag Harbor incident, and there's actually every year there's a Shag Harbor UFO Expo.
Oh, really?
And there's going to be one in sometime. Just Google Shag Harbor Expo there.
I am going to check that out.
And it's actually from this point on, right now we're in August. It's next month sometime.
Wow.
And I believe right now Nick Pope's going to be there. And let me see. They got a lineup. It's a weekend thing. It's a Saturday and a Sunday. And they got 2 or 3 other big names lined up. And I think Travis Walton's there this time too.
Oh, wow.
And Chris Stiles does a very, very good job in his presentation of the Shag Harbor crash. And and his findings are astounding.
Well, let's get into that a little bit. What was the Shag Harbor incident for all of our listeners that are not aware of it?
Well, okay, the Shag Harbor incident, it was for many years. It was first off, there was a crash in 1967, and a guy by the name of Laurie, who still there's a little kind of a very small UFO Shag Harbor museum. It's very, very small. It's only the room of a small size of a small bungalow. But he's about 80 some years old now, and he's actually the one who made the initial report to the RCMP, which is our national police.
Yep.
And so they all thought it was a downed airliner. So it got responded in normal terms, and it got into the public eye and into the investigation process as originally as a downed airliner. It became closer when all the fishermen went out to find it, and it obviously had it had yellow foam all around it, and it sunk below the water, and then it went out into the ocean. So over 40 years, Chris spent time investigating this. And so it became evident over time that it was actually a UFO, not an airliner. And so it became touted for many years as the most investigated by normal police event in the whole world. But as Chris was working on this case, and he wrote his first book on it, he kept hearing stories about something about UFO, 2 UFOs under the water, 2 alien beings on it trying to repair themselves. And he just thought it was a rumor. And then over time, actually what he actually found out, and he actually found some proof or indirect proof on the naval warship that was sitting over top that that this actually did happen, but it wasn't Shag Harbor time. It was almost 10 years prior. So and it took him a long time to get this because these guys that he's interviewing has security clearance documents so anyway, that's his story. And he just brought out a book called I don't remember the name of it. If you Google on Amazon, Chris Stiles, and I think it's called Sweep 5 or something. And so the book just came out last month, and then Chris is going around speaking about it. So that's out of our province. The interesting thing for the UFO people that Stanton Friedman was a resident in New Brunswick, and Fredericton, New Brunswick is our capital. And as most people know, the Stanton Friedman passed away about 5 years ago. Yeah. But he had actually decided to, prior to that he would donate his files to the provincial archives. And so that all worked out, and much to our sadness, Stanton Friedman passed away, still working. He retired 3 times, but he was still working, and he passed away in an airport, I think in Toronto, on his way back. And then so you got to remember that when he was sending all his files to the provincial archives. Now you got to remember, our provincial archives only do corporate and finance. So they were blown away when 9 cargo vans of files showed up.
Wow.
And it was so massive. Grant Cameron out of Winnipeg, a very respected ufologist, and flew back and helped the provincial archives categorize it and do this and do that and do that and so on. So that was phase 1. Then I have a friend by the name of Hal Scarab who knew Stanton very, very well. And his background is military. He's written 22 books on the military. But I found out about it accidentally a couple of years ago that he actually did a book on UFOs. So I said, well, I better get his book. And I read it, and I found it interesting. But as it turned out, Stanton, when he passed away and everything went to the archives, Hal knew Stanton really well, so he was good friends with Stanton and the family, and he was in the military, and he was actually in intelligence for the Canadian Army, and he actually spent his last 5 years of his career handling intelligence in Afghanistan. So that was his military background, and then he was on the board of directors for our local Fredericton Museum, and so being on the board of directors, he just was interested because he did displays for the museum to do, and his forte is actually World War I and World War II displays. And then he told me, well, it was a volunteer position. Pretty soon, this guy quits or this guy, passes away, and suddenly he is the head of the board of directors. So he come up with this idea just prior to COVID. He knew his wife, so he went to his wife and said, what are you doing with all the other stuff that Stanton had that didn't go to archives? She said, well, it's still all in the basement. He said, what do you plan on doing with it? She said, well, I don't know. there was alien heads, and there was books that he did, and there was mementos he had. And
sure.
And she says, I don't know what I'm going to do with it. She says, this stuff's so weird. She says, I don't think people even buy it at a yard sale. She says, he says, well, how about we do this? He said, I'll take everything I want out of it, and we will do a couple rooms in our museum, 2 full rooms of Stanton Friedman stuff.
Epic.
And he says, and we'll run it for a year as commemoration to your, Stanton Friedman. We all love them. And then, when your daughters come back from the big city, they can stop in and look at it. They'll like it. Well, it turned out so well. It totally exceeded anything the university ever did, or the museum ever did. And so they didn't discontinue it after a year. They're moving into year 5, and there's no plans to ever discontinue it.
That is awesome to hear. And just recently here in the last couple of years, Rice University has kind of done the same thing, starting up an archive of the anomalists. And my favorite thing is that it's being done by their religious studies department.
Yes, I watched a lot of their YouTube seminars.
Yeah. Yes. And how has, because of course the topic here in America and the attitude with our government is rapidly shifting in regards to UFO, UAP. How are things received in Canada?
I think it's pretty much the same. Like the Canadians know more about American news than the Americans know.
Yeah.
We joke around, maybe there's nothing else to do in Canada except, watch the American news. So, and we're very Americanized. The only thing is that with Canada, we're on the outside looking into the U.S. So most Canadians are not right or left when it comes to politics. They know the American politics, but they're going to look at the man to vote. They're not going to look at the political stripes. So, so I think we're pretty much equal on attitude and so on. On the record, the Canadian military and the Canadian police force don't really do much with the UFs. That's on the record. Though indications has always said, well, it's funny how, we have a case and it's a big case. The U.S. seems to know more about it or as much about it than we do. So anyway, back to cases that I know more about. Please. You were asking earlier about some cases I've investigated. I've just kind of put the word out. I'm interested. Some people are coming to me, sometimes as customers. One of my favorite cases is these people are still living, and it's in my book. They're leaving the city of Fredericton, heading to back to St. John. And so I'm chatting with them. I'm talking to them about kitchens, and of course they know So then they suddenly, do you believe in UFOs? And so I could see what was coming, and I goes, no, I don't believe in UFOs. Belief constitutes faith. I know there's UFOs. And they go, oh, we got a story for you. And they both tell me this story. They're 70 years old, and they had left Fredericton, going back to St. John. They get by the Gagetown base. And he said, so what he was telling me, he says, first thing I noticed, we're driving. And I interrupt him. I said, I knew his kids were 25 and 30 years old and married. He had 2 boys. He'd already told me that. I said, do your kids believe in UFOs? Of course. They were in the back seat. So here we have 4 witnesses. The 2 boys are still living, and the husband and wife, and they're both standing there, the husband and wife. And he says, the first thing I noticed, we're driving along, all sound stopped. And then I look over to my left, and in behind the trees, about off the edge of the road, probably 100 feet away, there's literally a 3-story snow globe in behind the trees. 3 stories. And he says, the strange thing is, the light coming off it didn't look like any other light I've ever seen before or after. So he's saying, he says, we pulled over, we're looking at it. I want to get out and go down and see what it's all about. And my wife won't let me out of the car. And she interrupts, of course you weren't getting out. You're going to leave me, and you disappear, and then I have to take the kids to the road, that sort of thing. And so she's interjecting into this story, which really adds confirmation that this is what they actually did see. And so I just found it, and I only know of all my research in the last 50 years, I only know of a couple other cases of a craft like that. And one was about roughly in the mid-50s in France. And so that was kind of an unusual sighting. Another one that's really interesting that I find is that we have a family friend. This was buried, and this is where I'm picking up a lot of the stories right now, is just a lot of cases I'm investigating right now is not so much current. They're 20, 25 years old. So this one's really interesting because there's a family friend who was best friends with my mother and father, and I knew him all the time he was growing up. So, and I'd heard a story that him and his wife had seen a UFO on a snowmobile. And so that's fine. And I'd been planning on, I knew where he lived, and I see him amongst the community. He's 82 years old, but he's just as sharp as a teenager. And so, I hadn't got around to it, and he happened to be at the local store, and we're good friends. He's a real jokey type guy, and and we're just chatting. And I said, I said, what are you up to? And and then there's other people around. We know them all. And I said, Wayne, when I was a kid, I thought you were 100 years old then. Well, I got a big laugh, and that was fine. But I'm gauging the whole situation. And I'm seeing who's in the store, and when am I going to get a private motion? So he steps outside the store. And he's heading to his car. And he goes, hey, and I step out and the door's closed. There's nobody else around. I said, hey, Wayne, I got a question for you. And he turns to me. I said, oh, well, what? And I says, tell me about the UFO you seen in 1967 over here by the Arnold Rockwell farm. And I said, you guys seen on the snowmobile. And he stopped right. I go, well, man, that was a long time ago. He goes, oh, yeah. So he told me the whole story, And so this is a case of 25, 30 years old, floating around the family. The immediate family knew about it. He said, when he was telling me the story, he goes, was you talking to my wife? And I goes, no, I heard the story from your daughter. Oh, okay. So that is actually in my book. That
wow. Wow.
So that's just that. And so if you ask people, there's sometimes those stories in families that even if you're close to it, you may not even know about it.
Yeah. Yeah, precisely. Right. And, it's great to see so many people willing to come forward with their stories now. So many people who are emboldened with the current climate to come forward, share their experience, because as we've been saying with so many MUFON investigators, it's never too late to give your report. Frequently is the case that a report comes in 20, 30 years later and it confirms 2 other sightings. That were already reported when it happened.
That's right.
So it's never too late to give your report to an investigator to follow up with things.
Absolutely.
Let everybody know where they can go to get your book, where they can go to join your social media, where they can go to keep up with all your research, and how to connect with you if they're in the New Brunswick area and have a sighting.
Well, on social media, I'm the chief administrator on this. It's called UFO NB. NB is for New Brunswick. And it's a closed group. You have to be invited to go on.
Okay.
And any articles that I do, or if I'm doing historical articles, I will put it on there first before I punch it out to the rest of the Facebooks.
All right.
And then on there, I do some slideshow presentations on the UFO subject in the Maritimes or around Canada, and I will be expanding that in the next year, and it will be on there. And if you're interested in a copy of this magazine, just contact me, and typically I'll just mail it out to you.
All right.
And so that's a couple ways to get a hold of me. And then occasionally I do public speaking at the Fredericton Museum too. To help support that museum.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Pleasure.
I
Nice
appreciate it, Jim. It's been great seeing you walk around and talk with folks about all your work. And thank you so much for making it out here to the MUFON Symposium.
It's been my pleasure.
Absolutely. While you were online checking out all of the amazing work of Jim Lawrence, make sure to stop on by CuriousRealm.com. CuriousRealm.com is where you can find all of the episodes. That's where you can follow, subscribe. Go find our YouTube channel, everything else. That's also where you can find CuriousRealm.com/store, where you can buy your copies of all of our guest books and other materials. Stay tuned through this commercial break. We will be right back with our continuing coverage of MUFON Symposium 2023 from Covington, Kentucky, right after this. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to our conclusion of day 1 of MUFON Symposium here in Covington, Kentucky. We have with us my amazing wife, Amy Jordan. How are you doing, baby?
Hi, how are you doing? I am doing great. I've had a fun day meeting lots of amazing people. How about you? How have your interviews gone?
We've had a couple of interviews today with vendors, things like that.
That's
it's been great. It's been nice to see all of the speakers arriving. The first couple days of this, just so you know, folks, are very internal. The entire first day, yesterday, even before pre-registration, is 7-8 hours of field investigator training.
That's right.
That is a huge component of this show, is the day-long field investigator training. This morning, There was a 2.5-hour meeting of all the state directors regarding things.
An early morning tour of a particularly paranormal location in the area, name of which not found. I'm sure I will post it. But I saw a bunch of people going out on a tour early morning. So there's some activities, but the in convention center expo stuff is just getting started. So it's great that you were able to connect with the people that got here early.
Yeah, exactly. And I like being here early mainly because you get much more of an opportunity to walk around and chat with people before things get really hectic, before the crowd really gets here.
Yes.
Of course, things start off on Friday, but people have work, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So what has been your experience so far, Amy? This is actually your second
This is my
convention
second
like this
Symposium.
to come to.
That's right. Yeah, last year I was here, and so today, during the times that Chris has been doing the interviews, I've been working the table and chatting with people about the podcast and getting them connected. I talked to quite a few people this is their first MUFON Symposium. This is the first time they were out. Some of them do help with investigations in their cities and states, but also some people are just here. Oh, I just figured this out. I've met a few people who have told me their experience stories. I've met a few people that have told me their stories of investigation. And then I've just met some people who are just interested and want to be part of the community. And I told them what I'll tell you guys, which is this is a really great sort of first festival if you want to get involved in the paranormal investigation, if only just because it's built so intensely on scientific investigation and really putting effort into finding knowledge and collecting that knowledge and then comparing it across all sorts of different things. There's so many people that are working together to develop it. So it's just been really interesting to meet different people at different points in that experience, from the people calling with the experience to the people receiving the calls. I've met all sorts of different people who have come up and been interested about the podcast.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. It's always great to get out, get amongst the people. People ask me why I sponsor these events. They don't happen without sponsors. I could probably put my money behind a local political candidate. I'd prefer this. I believe in this much more.
Sure.
And yeah, it is an.
I support you using our money in that way.
It is.
I say out loud.
It is an interesting slice of the world, and as an experiencer myself, it can be hard to quantify that in your life. It can be hard to make the complete loop of understanding of A, what your experience is, B, what its place is in your life. So for me, events like this are very much being hip deep in the community, being there to hear people's experiences, seeing people swap their experiences. It's great. It's healing for a lot of people who are experiencers.
Yes. I've also spoken to people who have never experienced anything but are here because they feel that they are called to listen. They are called to receive the information. Different people, a few of the investigators that I chatted with, as well as the gentleman we spoke to earlier about the energy art that he was creating.
Yeah.
They're really attuned to hearing from people and receiving what they have. And even though they themselves have not directly had an experience, they just feel like this is a community they want to be part of. They want to be part of supporting and being there for other people. So it's just really wonderful to meet different people that come at it from different ways, but who all sort of care. And that's another part of this festival that I really just think is an amazing part, is that it seems very much like just sweet, nice people. I was telling somebody, I said, there are places where you'll go and you'll tell your story and they'll make fun of you. This is not one of those places.
Yeah.
You're safe here. So meet people, talk to them, know that you can at least let that bit of guard down.
Yeah, precisely, because it's hard.
Yeah.
With the modern conversation, it has gotten easier for people to share experience. There has been a great movement toward the paranormal and unknown, and it's been great to open the conversation and even to open family members' eyes to the experience that somebody may have in their family. Or, I've said quite a few times recently on the show that probably about 10 years ago, you would have heard a lot of political discussion around holiday tables. Now, a lot of the discussion is, wow, crazy Uncle Bill wasn't so crazy. A lot of the roaring political debates that used to happen around family tables aren't happening anymore. But oddly enough, this conversation is. And the conversation about the unknown quantitatives in the universe is happening. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting to see that shift in mentality amongst regular everyday people.
Yeah. Yeah, and the way that people are receiving the information makes it's become more commonplace to talk about, so that it's less of a hot button. You're not bringing up like who the new mayoral candidate is and you make Aunt Susie mad. Instead, it's like you talk about aliens and everybody's got an opinion and nobody's like mad about your opinion. They just have their own. Yeah. Like there are very few things in our world right now that don't have a right and wrong. And yet, just to bring it around to this symposium's theme, the theme for this year is friend or foe, meaning it is a further examination from a safe space that we are in to have the discussion. Is this a good thing or is this a bad thing? What's going to happen here? Now, last year, the topic was about how it's become more acceptable to have the conversations like we're discussing. And so because we are more open and more people are having these discussions, we can now go to where we usually go, which is this good or bad?
Well, yeah. And last year was very much about the media reaction to things. And this is Friend or Foe 2.0.
Yes.
Last year was Friend or Foe 1.0. Because that was the big question. We had our first UAP panels in Washington just before the event last year, and that was a big question of how the media has treated UFOs over the many years, how the news has treated UFOs, UAPs, and the rapid switch of the media. And I pointed it out numerous times on the show. The rapid use of the word UFO denier by the media. Where at one point somebody called a UFO believer on the news would have been ridiculed.
Yeah.
Crazy man wrecks his car seeing UFO. Because he believes would have been the story. Now you have them using the rhetoric of UFO denier. Yeah. And it's interesting to see that change. And I say rhetoric, folks, because, well, it's the media. That's what they do. It's a rhetoric. I don't care who you're watching. It's following a paradigm of something. It's following a thought form. There are very few of them that give you the full-on Edward R. Murrow, these are the facts, just the facts, make up your own mind.
Yeah, we don't have that.
No, we very much have, this is what Mountain Dew says, so, make sure it matches the sponsors.
Sure.
And that can be great, but it can also be very troublesome, especially when you're talking about topics like this. The idea of Friend or Foe 2.0 now is, we have a lot of defense talk going on in these panels. We have, even in the contractor panels that just happened, the UAP whistleblower panels with Grush, there was quite a bit of talk about defense of our skies, quite a bit of talk about training ranges for the military being invaded. One of the many cases that they brought up numerous times is, of course, the famous Malmstrom Air Force Base incident where part of our nuclear arsenal was actively deactivated for moments when these craft were sighted. So, yes, there is very much the discussion going on right now of how do we interpret action. One of the things I have warned about regularly is personification. the idea of humanizing. Dr. Churchill at University of Dallas, the abnormal psychology professor that I had numerous times whenever we'd go watch the gorillas at the Dallas Zoo, things like that, would tell me, Chris, please be careful. Don't stop anthropomorphizing. You're anthropomorphizing. You are humanizing the actions of that gorilla. You have no idea why he picked up the stick. If you give an idea of why the gorilla picked up the stick, now you're putting actions on the gorilla, and you're assuming, well, this is why I would pick up a stick. And we have to be careful with that anthropomorphization whenever we're talking about possible life from somewhere else, even if it's robotic life from another dimension, another part of the universe, another parallel universe, a parallel Earth, what have you. The fact is, there is something there that we kind of have to approach cautiously, and we very much have to try not to anthropomorphize or assume what the motivations of this thing are.
I wish we could learn that about each other, to be totally honest with you. I hear what you're saying, and then I'm like, wouldn't it be great if we didn't just assume that we knew what each other were thinking, because we don't.
Well, no, and that's just it. We are in a society right now where people are having the conversation on the way to the table. And that's a hard thing, believe me. You want to get your thoughts straight. You're on the way to have a dinner with somebody who maybe you've had an altercation or a misunderstanding with. How many times is it that you're literally rehearsing what you're saying before you ever get there, which means at that point that you have now answered questions on their behalf, which means that you laid the great foundation for a wall before you ever came to the table of discussion. Yeah. And we have to be careful of that too, that we don't start laying those bricks. The beautiful thing about the term that Grush used of non-human intelligence is the fact of, if you say this craft is alien, just out the gate, you've now put it into a box. You've put that sighting and experience and encounter into a box of alien. Not possibly this, not possibly that, not maybe this possibility. Instead of leaving it open to 25, 30 possibilities, no, it is now in the box of alien. If it doesn't fit that, what is it now? And no different than the scientists who, on the other end, have been ignoring this question for so many years. As they said in the NASA panel, woefully, we have not been scientists. Our job is to explore the 3 to 5% anomaly, not to keep proving the known quantitative. When you keep proving the known quantitative, you end up in a paradigm, and you're no longer science. You're no longer Magellan saying, well, I know somebody said the world was flat, but I'm going to go over that ridge in the ocean and see what happens. Who's with me? And that's what science is supposed to be. It's supposed to boldly go where no man has gone before. Scarily enough sometimes, even right now, there's Oppenheimer is in the movie theater, and not many people are aware of the truth of that second button. The first bomb was different than the second bomb that we built, and the second bomb was the hydrogen bomb. And when they went to push that button, one of the calculations said all the hydrogen in the atmosphere will ignite. So imagine being inside of this hydrogen-filled sphere that we know as Earth's atmosphere, and one dude in Nevada goes, boop, and all the hydrogen ignites. It would be the end of the world. Immediately. But we pushed the button.
Just to see.
Well, I mean, that's science, unfortunately. That's science. That is the risk that science takes, and the risk that it takes upon itself when done properly. That was a big moment of examination that people have looked at for years and years, and we're right on that cusp right now. There is new technology, there are new things, new revelations, new concepts in science that are out there that really do prop up a lot of what UFO, UAP investigators have been saying for years.
So this weekend, what is the thing that you're looking forward to the most?
One of the things I'm looking for, I'm hoping to be able to grab David Paulides and have him over here to discuss his Missing 411 series. I bring that up regularly in the show because there are numerous places in the United States, prime example being the Pacific Northwest, where, of course, quite a few Bigfoot sightings happen, things like that. There's a regular number of people that just kind of go missing in state and federal parks. Never to be found. There 1 minute, not there the next.
Like gone, or like they
gone,
find
gone.
their body later?
No, gone.
Oh.
Gone. Poof.
Ooh.
Gone.
Yeah.
And yeah, there are places like the Pacific Northwest where it's still a full-on rainforest up there. There are a few planes every couple of years that go missing. Like, they have transponders, but the area is so thick they can't get to it. They can't get to the crashed airplane. So yeah, that has been one of the things that I bring up regularly when it comes to cryptids, cryptozoology, things like that. Even these kind of sightings, UFO, UAP sightings, there is a great part of our country that we have not explored, folks. The way I show that to people is feel free to Google it up. United States at Night from ISS. Last image is probably about 7 years old at this point. But when you look at that, you will see that about 70% of the United States is flat dark. Flat dark at night. There ain't a city there. There ain't nobody there. So when you're talking a good 60, 70% of our country being undeveloped, wild land still. Many parts of it, like the Great East Thicket here in Texas, so thick you can't see 50, 60 feet past you because the trees and the vegetation are so thick. Yeah, we have a great realm of things that are just burgeoning in science right now that makes a lot of this study very, very exciting. Not just UFO, UAP, but cryptid studies, paranormal studies, the link between them, especially UFO and paranormal, things like that. The fact that some experiencers come back physically changed. And I don't mean like implant-wise. I mean like come back with the ability to heal through touch. Come back with psychic abilities. Come back with changes that are really strange and tapped into a new font of knowledge, it seems like. And the example I give is the fact of, we're dealing with very high vibration technologies. When you're talking about something like we can levitate things, I can hop onto Amazon and for $50, I could have a levitation device delivered to the doorstep by the time we get home Monday. Tiny little ultrasonic levitation device. Dial in the frequency, pop in a little pith ball, and it'll float in midair because of the repulsion of sound. Like, these are things you can buy in kits for $50, you know? But it's sound. It's frequency that makes that happen. Right. And it's very, very high frequency. So when you're talking about the energies of UFOs, the energies that it would take to produce the power that would happen with, that cloaking technology would happen with, things like that. You're talking about very high vibrational fields.
Yes.
Things like what they were playing with in the Philadelphia experiment.
Yes,
stuff like
our recent fave that we were deep diving.
Things start changing, weird things start happening.
Right.
Hutchison effect, for example, where at certain amplitudes and frequency ranges, solid objects become kind of liquid. and start shimmying and shaking.
Yeah.
Levitation occurs, things like that. And yeah, much like when I worked broadcast, there was a big sign in front of the transmitter and the dish that said, "Don't come near here." Because, like, you're walking in front of that massive vibrational field. You know, it can affect you. So the fact of somebody being in a craft like that, having an experience with a craft like that, having an experience with a being like that, sure, can absolutely permanently shift the way, no different than using a magnet on a watch, and now the gears are magnetized, and the watch doesn't work. You know?
Yeah.
That piece of metal has been affected by this field permanently changed.
Yeah.
All it has to do is be near it. So very much the same thing with us. We are huge transmitters. That's all we are, especially our brain. It's just a big fat transducer. So
Well, it'll be interesting to see what you learn. Hopefully, when we get
Sure.
Mr. Politis on the show.
well, we'll stay tuned, folks. We will be having Raymond Szymanski on to talk about his 50 Shades of Gray's book. He is actively a former U.S. Air Force employee and has seen all kinds of interesting things at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. We'll be talking with him. Our good friend Mindy Tautfist is here. We'll be talking with Mindy over the next couple days. Our good friend Sev Talk is here presenting, so we'll have her. She was the MC last year. We'll also be having Map in Black on coming up soon. This guy is awesome. He's a cartographer here that actively makes a map of the United States featuring all of the cryptids, all of the haunted places, all of the UFO sightings. Absolutely awesome. So we'll be having him on as well. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning into our first day of coverage here at MUFON Symposium 2023 in Covington, Kentucky. We will be back tomorrow with our continuing coverage for day 2. Stay tuned, everybody. CuriousRealm.com is where you can find all the episodes. CuriousRealm.com/story is where you can go to share your story of the unexplained or paranormal. If you have been witness to a UFO, if you have been abducted, stop on by, share with us your story, your evidence. We will share it with our experts and try to get you some answers. Stay tuned, folks. When we come back, we will begin our Day 2 coverage of MUFON Symposium right after this.